Hey everybody, Marcus here. There's an expression that I have often heard from parents. Parents say, I work hard so my children can have all the things I never had. The substantive sentiment contained in this expression is, however, somewhat unclear at best and misguided at worst. The misguided nature of this sentiment comes from its conflict with another saying parents have, namely, I wish my kids retain my values. Yet both of these expressions can be interpreted in so many ways that it is easy to dismiss my accusations if they are not made particular as to their meaning. In the first case, a parent who desires that his child have all the things he himself has not had is prone to purchasing all sorts of gifts for his child. If the parent did not have a bicycle until age 10, the parent will purchase a bicycle for his child at age 5. If the parent never traveled with his family, the parent will take his child on trips, and so on. Through the process of interrogating his own biography, the parent identifies experiences and objects that were absent in his own childhood and ensures such lapses are not present in the life of his child. Now, can it be said that the values and character of a person are in some meaningful way informed by his upbringing? Well, surely it can. So from this it would follow that values and character are contingent on the conditions of that upbringing. If this is true, then a parent who raises his child in a way radically different from how his own childhood unfolded is in fact acting in contradiction to his desire for his child to retain his values. Now, this makes sense when we look at self-made men who end up with spoiled children. As the child does not need to go through the same struggles in their childhood as the parent did, the child will not develop the same relationship to the value of money or work ethic as his father did. However, this issue in relation to child rearing is only tangential to the substantive sentiment itself. Perhaps what the parent means when he says that he wants his child to have all the things he never did is that the parent desires for the child to have opportunities to excel beyond that which was possible for the parent. For example, if the parent could not afford to attend university, he would desire for his child to have the financial backing to be able to do so. Yet here too, I believe the sentiment is deeper than mere external opportunity. University is a means to an education. Education, in turn, is a transformative process that in one way betters the person who has gone through it. However, education is only a form of betterment in one case. An educated person can turn out to be a monster after all. An uneducated person can turn out to be a saint. It cannot be the case that the only opportunities a parent desires for their child are those linked to education. Now, is it the case that parents who have problems with drinking desire that their children not have those problems? Well, it is. Is it also the case that parents who have confidence issues desire for their children to be courageous? Well, indeed they do. Now, if this is true, then a general rule can be inferred. Parents desire that their children become more virtuous than they themselves are. Let us see how all this ties together. There are two major categories of virtues. In the first case, there are virtues that pertain to those things which are necessary. In the second case, there are virtues that pertain to those things that can be otherwise. Now don't worry, this will make sense very soon. Things that are necessary are things like mathematical truths and knowledge we usually attribute to science, things that don't change. These are the intellectual virtues, namely Sophia and episteme. When a parent desires for their child to have the opportunity to participate in a higher education, the parent in fact desires their child develop the intellectual virtues of episteme and Sophia. Now, let us turn to the second major grouping of virtues, namely those associated with things that can be otherwise. These are what are usually called the moral virtues, such as justice, temperance, prudence, and fortitude. When a parent with a drinking problem desires their child not to drink, the parent in fact wishes the child possess the virtue of temperance above that of the parent himself. So too, If the parent wishes their child have confidence, which in turn is a consequence of courage, and courage in turn a consequence of fortitude, then the parent really wishes the child have a greater share of fortitude than the parent himself possesses. In this way, the original sentiment we have described can be reworded to a very simple statement. The parent wishes their child turns out to be a better human being in every way than he himself is. Indeed, what parent would ever desire otherwise? And indeed, what better way can any child honor their parents than to fulfill such a desire? Now, let me tell you a short personal story. My parents came from a working class background. Over the course of my childhood, I watched them battle their way into the middle class. In turn, I, along with my brother and sister, each battled our way into the upper middle class. Now, a long time ago, well before my discovery of philosophy, I'd set a goal, namely, to elevate myself into the upper class, and then in turn elevate my family. In other words, to become wealthy. Now, this is what I believed would honor my parents' sacrifices for me. This is also where the problem begins. I looked at the wealthy and their decadence and thought to myself, is this what it means to be in the highest class of people? It was not the case that I feared becoming decadent myself. No, I thought that there was something seriously flawed with the idea that such disgusting people would be considered part of the upper class, part of the elite of society. It was not until much later in my philosophical development that I discovered what the problem was and why my goal was naive. Now let me ask you, what do we think of when we speak of class? Well, we think of concepts like the working class, the middle class, and the upper class. We think that it is more desirable to be upper class than middle class. We think it is more desirable to be middle class than working class. In fact, we praise the possibility of upward mobility. After all, a good education is the door to the middle class and all that. Our politics has all sorts of sentiments relating to class. The Marxists look upon the rich as the bourgeoisie keeping the proletariat down. We had the 99% protesting the 1%, class warfare, wealth redistribution, resentment towards the rich, and so on. When we speak of class, we speak of an ordering of rank. In modern times, an ordering of rank based on money. Yet we all know that being in possession of large amounts of money does not make one a good person. Nor does it make one happy. Nor does it guarantee a good or long life. After all, there are many wealthy people who have overdosed on drugs or served jail time and so on. Indeed, an order of rank based on money is a poor paradigm through which to measure oneself. Now, let me ask you something. What do you think of when you hear the word aristocracy? Do you imagine rich people in fancy wigs and lavish clothing at great balls or masquerades? Do you imagine ruling elite where status comes through a bloodline? Indeed, we think of all these things. However, what if I tell you that when we imagine these things about the aristocracy, we are drawing wrong conclusions about them, at least about the aristocrats as they were before the 18th century? In 1688, England experienced what was called the Glorious Revolution. This was a move that shifted a great deal of power from the aristocracy to the Parliament. But to understand this power shift fully, we must understand how power was distributed up to that point. There were three classes during the 17th century. The lords temporal, who were the secular aristocracy, such as dukes, earls, counts, barons, and so on. There were the lords ecclesiastical, who were the bishops, the cardinals, and priests. Finally, there was everyone else, the commoners. Political power resided in the hands of the lords temporal, with the lords ecclesiastical holding influence but no direct authority. The lords temporal were not necessarily rich either. Many of the lesser lords, in fact, were not rich at all, especially the barons. Now, among the commoners, you had farmers who did not wield wealth, and you had very wealthy merchants. However, no amount of wealth that a commoner possessed would usually gain him entry into political power. Order of rank, in this way, was never determined by wealth. Now, there was a reciprocal relationship between the commoners and the lords. The lord had to provide protection to the commoners, and the commoners in turn provided taxes and men to serve in the armies of the various lords. Now, it was very important to each lord that the commoners were kept happy. If the peasants grew dissatisfied with their lord, oftentimes a rebellion would occur, and the lord would either lose his head or would be pushed out of his position of power by another lord. For example, if the peasants of one district saw that the baron of the next district was throwing festivals for his subjects, the peasants of the first district would grow dissatisfied. Fearing that his charges would rebel, the first baron would copy the second baron and throw a festival for his charges as well. Now, these barons indeed did throw festivals for the peasants, very lavish and prolonged festivals, very expensive festivals. But someone had to pay for these festivals. The barons could not afford to pay for them, so, well, they taxed their people. Large portions of the taxes in turn came from the wealthy merchants among the commoners. As there were considerably fewer wealthy merchants than peasants, there was no real risk of rebellion. Since pretty much all the barons were doing the same thing, these merchants had nowhere to go where the situation would be any different. Now, I'm obviously simplifying things immensely, but please bear with me. These wealthy merchants did not like this situation one bit. They thought it was very wasteful, yet they had no political power or ability to do anything about it. After all, the lords were entitled to tax these merchants as they saw fit. The lords did not need to reciprocate with any political favors. If a merchant did not pay, he would be punished severely, and that would be the end of it. The Glorious Revolution of 1688 in England that I mentioned earlier was in effect staged by the wealthy merchants against the nobility. Now, let me give you another name for these wealthy merchants. These were the bourgeoisie. As such, the Glorious Revolution was a victory of the bourgeoisie over the aristocracy. But it was so much more than that. It was a victory of commoner values over aristocratic values. Nietzsche had a great distaste for the English. The reason was because the Glorious Revolution was the first significant defeat of aristocratic morality, the first defeat of noble values, the defeat of master morality replaced by slave morality in the political sphere. In my series discussing modernity, I talk about Nietzsche's criticism of Rousseau. For Nietzsche, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who he credited as a major player in bringing about the French Revolution, was just a continuation of overthrowing noble values and replacing them with commoner values. The French Revolution was the bourgeoisie victory over the aristocracy in France. When Nietzsche was still alive, he was seeing the same thing happen in Germany with the formation of the Second Reich. It was bourgeoisie values, the values of the commoner, the values of the peasant, that has given us our current conception of class. Where men used to be ordered by nobility, now they are ordered by money. Over time, in England, though titles still remained, the bearers of those titles were no longer noblemen. The bearers of those titles were now bourgeoisie commoners. These title bearers, these faux aristocrats, did not have the values of noblemen. So the question becomes, what is a nobleman if not his title? What is an aristocrat if not his bloodline? Well, it is his disposition. To be a nobleman is to possess a virtue. It is to possess honor, to order yourself and all men on different scales than money, to order based on master values. In ancient Rome, a slave could win his freedom, serve in the army, become a citizen, then hold high political office. In medieval times, a peasant could join the army, distinguish himself in battle, be knighted, and through further deeds that won favor, gain a title. Nobility was within reach of anyone, but it was not easy and could not simply be bought. The qualities it took to become a noble were not the same qualities it took to acquire wealth. Though there were, of course, vice-ridden nobles who came to their title through heredity, often these were a shame on the family and were not influential or important, in effect, losing most, if not all, the benefits of being a noble. No, to be a noble, one had to behave as one, to risk life and limb, to have courage, to fight, and to win. You see, it is a commoner's values that compel a man to wealth alone. This is why the likes of Paris Hilton, the Kardashians, and so forth are nothing to aspire to. Though they possess wealth, influence, and some power, they are still commoners. My original goal of elevating my family to the upper class, to become wealthy, were the values of a commoner. It was with this realization that I saw that the correct path to honor my parents requires me to supersede their commoner values, to aspire to noble values. Yet such values can only come through the enactment of great deeds. Not just deeds indicating success, not deeds that make the world a better place, but deeds that in some way help make people better. Deeds that inspire and motivate, deeds that serve as exemplars of virtue manifest and can be used as moral guidelines. The difference between a noble deed and mere success, well, can be seen in the following examples. Mark Zuckerberg, the founder of Facebook, has achieved great success. Those that look upon his deeds may desire themselves to one day own a company as successful as Facebook. Now, let us contrast this with a soldier who risks his life to rescue a captured friend. We do not ourselves desire to one day rescue a captured friend when we see this soldier. Instead, we desire this soldier's courage, that we ourselves are better and possess that quality that the soldier does. The soldier's deed can inspire us to such betterment, whereas Zuckerberg's deed cannot. In Zuckerberg's case, we may want what he has, but we do not want to be him. In the case of the soldier, we do not want to enact the same actions to achieve the same results, but be like the soldier, to possess those qualities of him. Nobility is worthy of choice. Now, this is the class of men I wish to belong to. This is the class of person I wish others would choose for themselves as well. But for now, I want to end this video with a historical example of how a single noble deed could change the world. This story will also show what a noble woman looks like, namely, what a lady is. This is the story of Lucretia. Rome had 7 kings. The 7th of these kings was a tyrant, and he showed that you must always be on watch for those who would usurp power. His name was Tarquin. He made the Roman people groan under a burden of slavery. He made them drain the Forum, the little creek that ran through it, creating a sewer to make it dry. He made them start building a temple to Jupiter, Jupiter Optimus Maximus, Jupiter the best and biggest, a true ruler of the Roman people. He had a son named Tarquin. Rome was at war with the city of Ardea, and the son of the tyrant was there with a number of Roman aristocrats besieging the city. Siege warfare, as we know, is a long and tedious business. As these aristocrats had little to do, they fell into a debate. They were debating the question of whose wife was the chastest. They went on, but, well, how are we to settle this bet? So they said to themselves, as this siege is yet to last a while, let us ride back to Rome and let us see whose wife is doing what. So they rode back and knocked on the first door. Aldus's wife was having a tremendous party. For the second case, the same thing. They went to Tarquin's house, and what his wife wasn't doing. Then they went to the house of Collatinus, one of the aristocrats, a very close friend of Brutus. They knocked on the door. There was the wife, sitting in her proper room, making a warm cloak for her husband with her own hands. She welcomes the men in, had food prepared, and sent them on their way. Well, there's no question there on whose wife was the chastest, the wife of Collatinus, Lucretia. So the men got back to their camp and, weary of their journey, went to sleep. Tarquin, the tyrant's son, he simply could not get the image of this chaste woman out of his head. He had to despoil her. He had to debauch her. This, after all, well, is how tyrants are. So Tarquin rides back in secret to Rome. He knocks. Lucretia opens the door, and seeing her husband's commander arrive alone, is thrown into a fear as to her husband's plight. She says, "My God, what has befallen my husband?" So Tarquin answers, "Oh, he has not fallen, but I have an important message for you. Please, may I come in?" Lucretia invites him in. Upon closing the door, Tarquin positions himself between Lucretia and the exit. He says, "Now, you and I will go to bed, my dear Lucretia." But Lucretia, trapped, standing her ground, says she will not betray her husband. To this, Tarquin replies, "Oh, you will, for if you resist, I will kill you. Then I will kill a slave. I will place you both in your bed, and when I return to the siege, I will tell your husband I had found you both in bed together, and in defense of his honor, killed you both where you lay." Lucretia thought but a mere moment and said, "I cannot shame myself and my husband in such a way. Fine, but be quick." Upon completing the deed, Tarquin, satisfied he had corrupted this woman, heads back to camp. Upon his departure, Lucretia sends a messenger to her husband, pleading he returns immediately as something terrible has happened. She does not reveal the nature of the matter in her message. Collatinus, immediately upon receiving the message, rides home with his friend Brutus. He arrives in Rome and enters his home. Lucretia, standing in resolve, says to her husband, "The imprint of another man is in your bed." She then recounts the incident that occurred mere hours earlier. Collatinus, hearing the events, says to Lucretia, "My wife, you are not at fault for what was done to you." Ever so calm, she replies, "Indeed, I am not at fault. But I fear that some other woman, upon hearing this incident, will use me as an excuse for unchaste behavior. Avenge me!" Immediately revealing the knife she had been holding behind her back, Lucretia stabs herself in the heart. Brutus, friend of Collatinus, picks up Lucretia's body and carries her into the streets. He yells to the crowd, "Do you see now what life under a tyrant is like? Is this what you want for yourselves? Swear now before the gods that we will liberate Rome. Swear that we will never again let a tyrant rule." You see, Lucretia's single act of nobility sparked the revolution that ultimately led to the overthrow of Tarquin, and it was not until Julius Caesar that Rome had another king. This is the character of nobility that inspires. This is ultimately what the aristocracy was, and this is ultimately what I believe is best and most worthy of choice in the human condition: nobility. Thanks for listening. Go team.